Lynx here. If Blade and Clara weren't strong enough, the two just received a 4-star sustain that provides great utility without the need to pull the Watcher, and aggro buffs without the hassle of freezes from March 7th. Though I will say that her aggro buff has its own problems and may not be as big as people are saying. Of course, Lynx is great without these two. She can be a sustain in any team, and she has our first AoE cleanse, which is amazing for those AoE debuffs like the Frigid Prowler's annoying slows. So we'll go through her kit, explain how great it is, then review her traces and her amazing Eidolons. Then we'll discuss her pros and cons and see if she's worth the hype. I'll then show you her best relics, including a cool technique with one, and her best light cones, and finish with her rotations, synergies, and team compositions. If you like this guide and want more, be sure to like and consider subscribing, because I do in-depth guides on every unit in the game. Anyway, let's begin. So Lynx is a 4-star quantum unit and follows the abundance path, sustaining allies and providing utility. Lynx is our second 4-star healer, and Lynx is also our second quantum sustain unit. At level 80, her base HP is 1058, her base attack is 493, which does not matter at all, and her defense is 551. Her speed is a nice 100 and her energy cost is only 102. Also, as an abundance unit, she has a lower chance of being targeted by enemies. So what makes her so unique? Well, it could be her basic attack, Ice Crampon technique, which is kind of scary to be honest. She straight up just jumps an enemy with her pickaxe. It will deal quantum damage to a single enemy, but just like Fuchs 1, this will scale on Lynx's max HP. It's nothing amazing, but a nice bonus, and this will deal 30 toughness damage and regen 20 energy. Her skill, Salted Camping Cans, is not just any healing skill though. It will of course first restore the target's HP by a percentage of Lynx's HP plus a flat amount. But then it will apply survival response to a single ally. This will increase said ally's max HP by a percentage of her own, and then if this ally follows the destruction or preservation path, they get an increase to their aggro, meaning they'll be hit a bunch more. The HP buff is about 600 at a well invested Lynx, which is pretty nice. The aggro buff is very cool to have since they are quite rare, and on an abundance unit it's even cooler. This will heal up your tank, give them more HP, and then give them a higher chance to be hit, meaning they can tank for your team even more, though 2 sustains in a team is rare. But for bruise units that want to be hit like Blade and Clara so far, this is excellent too. But remember, it's based on the ally turns, so Blade Bronya will cycle through those buffs and you'll have to place Lynx's speed strategically. Her ultimate Snowfield First Aid will heal all allies by a percentage of Lynx's max HP. But on top of that, it will dispel 1 debuff from all allies, which is so cool to have. There are many enemies, including the new Swarm True Stings boss, that apply a team-wide debuff that can range from frustrating to even deadly. It is locked to an ultimate unlike Luocha and Natasha, but it being AoE is such a nice thing. As for the cost, this ultimate will cost 100 energy. Her talent Outdoor Survival Experience makes her healing power even stronger. When she uses her skill, or ultimate, every ally healed will gain 2 turns of continuous healing, restoring their HP by a small amount of her max HP at the start of their turn. If they have the skill's Survival Response buff, the healing gets increased by over double. This is a really nice backloaded healing utility, and is really great for the ally that is now tanking more hits. Finally, her technique, Chocolate Energy Bar, is a restore technique, so you can use buffing or damaging techniques with it. After using it and entering battle, her talent's continuous healing is applied to all allies for 2 turns. It's only really nice in the overworld and simulated universe though. Let's check out her traces now. Her first essential passive grants Lynx 2 energy per hit on the target with survival response. This is actually very minimal and I couldn't find a real use for the 2 energy, but it's nice for when you really lack that tiny bit of energy in some situations, like I find often I do on Natasha. Her second increases her crowd control resist chance by 35%, which will drop a 100% CC chance to now about 86%. Her final one extends her talent's continuous healing duration by 1 turn, now having a 3-turn continuous healing, so allies gain a nice chunk of HP for quite a high uptime since Lynx will cycle her ultimate relatively quickly. As for her trace stat bonuses, she will get 28% HP, which is perfect for her whole kit, 22.5% defense, which is also really nice, and 10% effect resistance, which will be really nice to hit that broken kill stat line and further reduce CC effects. She honestly has 3 great trace stats. Her skill and ultimate should be prioritized first, then her talent, and her basics need no investment unless you're feeling a little bit sussy. Now for her Eidolons, which grant her so much bonus utility on top of what she already provides. Her first will grant all of her healing effects a 20% outgoing healing bonus when the ally is under half HP. This is really sweet for those extra chunky heals you might be needing, especially on a unit like Blade. It also means if an ally gets low during an enemy turn, that continuous healing becomes a little bit stronger. Her second grants her skill's survival response a new effect, now allowing the ally buff to resist debuff application for one time. It's a cleanse before the debuff even happens, and it's a very great and early Eidolon, allowing those DPS bruisers to keep on fighting. Her fourth grants the survival response another effect, now increase the target's attack by 3% of her HP for one turn. This is actually quite weird and will probably be overhyped. It's about a 150 attack buff at a well invested Lynx, and that is nice regardless, but you won't want his skill to just use his attack buff, and if you use it on Blade he doesn't care for the attack, and if you use it on Clara she wants it for her counters, not her turn, so you'd have to have the enemies in between your Lynx and your Clara. Her final Eidolon though is the real deal. It will boost the HP buff of survival response by an additional 6% of her max HP, bringing it up to a possible 900 to 1000 HP buff. It will also increase the target's effect resistance by 30%, which is pretty massive, and is our first effect resistance buff outside of Jeopardy 4, I believe. So how do we maximize these buffs? Well, let's see her best relics. Her best options are between a 4-piece Passerby set, a 4-piece Hackerspace set, or a 2-piece combo of both. I normally hate the Passerby 4-piece, but for Lynx in Blade Clara comps I feel like it's unironically pretty cool. If you want to use that skill's aggro and HP buff, you'll need to use a skill point, which is kind of useless when you don't need to heal, and you're a bit depleted on them on the first rotation. So having a skill point spare to use skill with no downside is really nice and starts up the aggro chain immediately. Hackerspace is comfy and gives her more speed and her team speed per ultimate. A 2-piece combo of both just gets 2 nice benefits. For planar ornaments, both fleet and kill work depending on what buff you prefer, but kill is definitely better in general for most units, especially for Blade. For main stats you want to go healing body, speed boots, HP orb, and NG or HP rope. Not really much else to it. The decision between ropes is that NG gets you a 1 turn shorter rotation and thus faster or more frequent heals, but HP will obviously provide a bit stronger heals. I prefer NG for the frequency on top of the safety because you get more ults for that debuff cleanse when it's truly needed. Substats will see you prioritize HP percent, speed, defense percent, and effect resistance. A good HP to beat is 5000. For Lycones, you can use a bunch of different ones depending on what you like. For a general best for heals, Time Waits for No One will be excellent for maximizing her HP based buffs as well as her healing. Her next best for healing is Perfect Timing S5 with the added utility of effect resistance. She needs to hit 60% to maximize the outgoing healing bonus, and with her base traces only needs 18% in substats, or 8% with kill. It brings you a lot of free stats and effect resistance and is very nice for her. If you want even shorter rotations, well you can run S5 post-op and Bonwhack to replace an NG rope, or just use an NG rope with post-op for an even shorter rotation. Team NG of course is nice with quid pro quo if you feel you need it, and finding multiplication is a godsend, and the passive essentially multiplies your speed by 1.25 times if you basic every turn. She will want to skill in some teams though, so it won't see the same big effect, but it's still nice. So speaking of rotations, let's view them. 5 basics is the standard for that 100 NG cost. If you end up using 2 skills, say to buff the taunt of someone, it can be a 4-turn one. Adding an NG rope allows for a 4 basic rotation too. And if you skill and somehow your target gets hit 5 times, you could do a 3-turn rotation, but that's all I could find useful with this passive. Let me know if you found something else. Finally, here are the 2 post-op rotations if you want to see them. Now, after we know all that, we can discuss her pros and cons. For pros, she has the first AoE cleanse, and this is immense for a lot of content. It isn't always needed, you can win without of course, but having it on the roster is awesome. Next, she's a 4-star abundance. This is a pro, but also a con for her potential strength, but now casual and free-to-play players have 2 healers without having to pull a 5-star one. Next, she has aggro manipulation. Much has it on her skill, but it's hard to solo sustain with her shields alone. On top of that, she has HP buffs. HP buffs are rare, and having them with Fushuan and now Lynx means past and any future HP scaling DPS have some allies that can truly benefit them. For cons, we have the skill being ally turn-based. If it was her turn, she would be fine with the Blade Bronya combo, but it means teammates can cycle out of it. It is another con because it means if you want the buff to last, you'll need to speed tune her, which is weird for an abundance to do. It lasts only 2 turns, so unless you want to skill every turn, you need to go after your DPS. For Clara, that's impossible unless you mess up her speed, which I absolutely don't recommend. You're going to have to pray that enemies go after Lynx but before Clara. But them going after Clara still retains 1 turn of the buff. Finally, the cleanse on ultimate means it's not as accessible as the cleanses from Luocha and Natasha. Even if it is stronger, if you don't have it up when it's needed, that AoE is all for nothing when your team is CC'd and about to fall. Now let's finish off with some synergy talk. Obviously, Blade is one to think about. With the E0 HP buff, his DPS increases by a nice 8%. At E6, it increases to 12%. The aggro increase is of course immense for him. The only problem I see is the turn-based aggro buff. The way you'd want to time it all is for Blade to take his turn, then Lynx, and if Bronya is in the team, then Lynx after Bronya. It means you need to speed tune correctly, and it would mean that during the enemy's turn, Blade would get the aggro increase. Unfortunately, if Bronya skills in the next rotation, it's gone, so you have 1 turn per skill, meaning a heavy skill point consumption. Blade still uses skill points, and Bronya does every turn too, so you can't really afford to spam Lynx's skill. It's a synergy and kind of not one. Without Bronya though, she's pretty cool for Blade's sustain. The real unit she will synergize I think with the best is Clara, but the turn thing still happens again. Clara will take her turn after Lynx instead, which does mean no speed tuning for Lynx, and then Clara will retain the buffs during the enemy attacks. I do wish her skill buff was 3 turns, but then maybe Lynx would be a bit too good. Anyway, I still think it's somewhat better than March due to no freezes, and the utility like AoE cleanse, debuff resistance, and effect resistance at E6. The attack percent buff is kind of useless on Clara though, unless the enemies take their turn in between Lynx and Clara. Thing is, I think Clara can afford to not need to use skills, and she doesn't have skill point negative support barring a skill spam Yukong, so maybe some skills from Lynx are fine. So for team comps, the Blade one would be Blade, Bronya, Pella, Lynx, and the Clara one would be Clara, Tingyun, Yukong, Lynx. Lynx goes after Bronya in the first team, and before Yukong in the second team. For a free-to-play early game team, you can go Lynx, FireMC, and Asta, having great survivability, and finish with a free DPS of your choice. For Mono Quantum, you can have the dual DPS option with Zila and QQ, or you can have the dual sustain option with Fushwan on top. Either works, and depends on how safe and reliable your Lynx is. I think she can solo sustain, especially with damage like Zila on board. Of course, you can do the bridging technique too, where you bring Silverwolf, your Quantum DPS, Lynx is your sustain, and then flex the 4th slot according to the enemy weakness. This means you can bring any Harmony for your Quantum DPS without needing a Quantum Harmony, which of course does not exist just yet. That is all on Lynx. Let me know if you pulled for her or how many of her you got whilst pulling for Fushwan. Thanks to all my amazing members, thank you all for watching and have a Guoba day.